Hi everyone and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at creating hexagons along a planar surface and also hexagons wrapped around a tube. So we're going to be designing the hexagon mesh, learning how to use an array tool, and then learning how to create these different types of meshes. Now this is a question that's been asked on my channel. Also it's been asked across a number of forums and Facebook groups. There are many ways of doing this and this is one of the ways that I do it. So I hope you enjoy these videos and let's have a look how we create this model. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to the site. I also have a Ko-Fi or a coffee site that you can donate to if you so desire, and that's at ko-fi.com/MANG0. I also run a Patreon where you can subscribe and get extra content, and that's at www.patreon.com/MangoJellySolutions. Any money that's kindly donated will be used to expand the channel. So I've started up FreeCAD and I'm going to come over to the sketcher. Within the sketcher, we're going to create the base sketch to create the hexagons. So we're going to start a new sketch and place it along the XY plane. To do this, we're going to be using this icon here, which if we drop this down, we have a number of different shapes in here. We've got pentagon, hexagon, octagon, regular polygon, etc. We're going to be using the hexagon in here. If you can't find this, then come up to sketch geometries, and you'll see create hexagon within. So the first hexagon we're going to create is on this point and we're going to come out. Now the idea is to create two hexagons that are arranged in a way that we can use the draft workbench to link array them. To do that we create one hexagon and hit escape and it sets some diameter using the constraint and arc or circle, which is this one around here. So this is construction geometry. I'm going to set this to 20 millimeters and hit enter. So we've got our first hexagon. I'm going to make sure that the point is on this line with a point on line constraint or point on object constraint. And that fully constrains the hexagon, making sure that these sides are vertical. We're going to create another hexagon now and place it in this right hand section of the screen here. Just going to click the right mouse button or hit escape and we're going to move it. And we're going to make sure that this side is vertical. So it mirrors this hexagon up here. And I'm going to set the diameter again to 20 millimeters. But I'm going to use an equality constraint against these two and make that equal. Now I've got to constrain this down and also set some distance for this to be away. We're going to stagger them like so. So when this is repeated, the hexagons will fit together. If we think about this and it's repeated down here, they will actually slot together. And if we place them in an array across here, then we build up a mesh full of hexagons. The easy way to constrain this is to use the polyline tool. And what we'll do is connect up these 2 points with polyline, come out and create a triangle with the point pointing downwards. Hit the right mouse button to get the mouse pointer back and we make all these equal. So all three make those equal. So just clicking on them. So if I move this triangle, the space between these will increase and decrease just by changing the size of the triangle. That sets the length on this triangle. And this is the spacing. So if I place this at 3 millimeters away, we can see everything's constrained. Now one other thing we have to do is finally set this triangle, all three sides, by clicking on them. This is known as a hungry selection because we're adding to the selection. We don't have to use the control key, we just click on them. And we'll use the toggle construction geometry. This is now construction geometry, so it won't be shown in the final sketch. If we close that now, we have our two hexagons. If I click top, you can see how they're staggered. Now we have to array these. So now we've got this sketch. The idea is to actually extrude this over in the part workbench after we've arrayed it a number of times. That's come over to the draft workbench to do our array. Select the draft workbench. We've got this gridding that's come up, which we don't need. So we can turn that off with the gridding down the bottom. and we select our sketch, come to modifications, array tools, and array. Left hand side we see the number of elements. Now I'm just going to go across this way first. So I'm just going to change Y to 1, and I'm going to deal with the x-axis, so 2 along the x-axis. I'm not going to change the x interval because I'm going to show you how to change that from the data tab. If we scroll down, we must make sure that the link array is checked. So this is more efficient when we create the copies going across. Let's hit OK. What you'll see over the right hand side, we've got another copy of the hexagons. Let's come into this array and look along the left hand side and have a look on the data tab at the properties we have. If we scroll down, we can see the count and we can see the number along the X. We also got this interval X. If we open this up, and we can change the X interval. So if I change this to 40, you can see that changes where that's going to sit. Now diameter is 20, so we can change that to 20 and it will place it in the right place. Now I've got those set, we can change the count along the X. The count here, let's change this to something like 5, and 5 of these going across. Now let's affect the Y axis. So number on Y at the moment is 1. Set this to 2. Zoom out and you can see we've got the top hexagons here. So we've got to close this gap. So we've got number Y, we've got to change the interval along the Y. So this one here. So we've got the number on the Y as 2. Let's come up to the Y interval. And we can reduce this down and click off and see where that places it. I'm going to reduce this down to 36 and we can see how that's fitted in there. Again, we can come in and now change the Y interval to what we want. So I'm going to go 4 and we get this honeycomb sketch. Now it's up to you how long or wide you want this, because this will be all down to the surface that you want to create with this honeycomb sketch. Let's come back over to the part workbench and start our Boolean operations. So at the moment we've got the array. We can use this array and extrude it. Now we're going to extrude this along a length that's greater than the thickness of the base that we're going to be using. So let's say about 20 millimeters. So we've got this extrusion here. Let's create our base. Now we can use either a sketch, or with this one, I'm just going to use a cube. Cube has been placed in position. Click on the cube and I'm going to set some length. And we'll go 100. You can see that there. And width of 100. And let's go for something like 110. It's up to you how wide you want this. And our height there is 10, so that's going to be within this. I'm just going to go 5 for the time being. It's important now to make sure the base is within the honeycomb. So at the moment it's actually in line with the bottom, which is not what we want. So we need to take the cube or the base, right click, transform, and pull this up to make sure it's within that honeycomb structure. Now when we remove this, look out for the sides. So we're going to Boolean this against this honeycomb, and it's up to you of what kind of effect you want on these sides. At the moment this is going to be removed and we're going to have this gap in. So if needs be, we can come back over to the extrude and we'll drill into it, click on our array, and we can just increase the number. So I can increase this, say, by 6, number on Y by 5, like so, and I take the cube, right click, transform, and I'm going to pull this back into position. So for instance, I'm going to make sure it goes through the middle of these hexagons And we can do the same, say about here, something like that. And okay that. Now I've got it positioned. I'm going to come over to the tree view, click on the extrude, and let's collapse the extrude. Click on cube. This is the one we want to keep. Click on the extrude, the one we're going to use as the cutting tool, and then come up to part, boolean, and cut. And now we've got our hexagon mesh. If this isn't the effect you want, what we can do is come back into the cut and right click on the cube, transform, and we can transform the visible cube. We can enable the visibility by pressing the spacebar on it. And if we go up to edit, refresh, you can see that automatically updates. So we can use the shortcut as well. On Ubuntu it's Control R, but on Windows it'll be something else. And we can decide what kind of effect we want. So I'm going to go for something like this. Now hit OK. And we've got the hexagon mesh. So this is good for planes or even cubes. For instance, I can come into the cube and increase the height. As long as we don't go above the height of the extrude, we'll be okay, because once we start going above the height of the extrude, let's set this to 40, then our cut will only be part of that cube, which might be the effect that you want. If that's not the case, then we come over to the extrude and we just change the length forward to say 80 and hit enter, and that's gone all the way through like so. What happens if we want this, say, on a cylinder? Well, for that we're going to be using the curves workbench. So for the next part of this tutorial, we're going to be looking at changing this so it wraps around a tube. For that, I'm going to get rid of the cut, get rid of the cube, and get rid of the extrude. So we're back to our array. I'm going to press the spacebar on the array so we can see the array. I'm also going to reduce the array down just to 1 along the X and 1 along the Y. So we get our original sketch back, but this is the array. Now to wrap this around a cylinder, let's say go for a tube. And remember, the more complex we make this, the larger we make it, the more time it's going to recompute. So I'm going to say the outer radius is of 40 mil. And inner radius, we could say take the outer radius, so outer minus 5 millimeters to make that 35. So if we change the outer radius, say 50, then we've got this link in here and we get a recalculation. So we've got 45 there. May not change, you can see the inner radius hasn't actually updated with that grayed out value, but it's still 45. You can see it's actually changed in there. Let's go for 40 and hit enter. We also need to set the height. So the height I'm going to set to 30. So this is the tube that I want to unwrap. And create hexagons around here to remove from the tube. To do that, I'm going to come over to the curves workbench, and that's installed from the tools add-on manager. And the curves workbench has a number of tools to deal with curved surfaces and NURB surfaces. We're going to be using the sketch on surface. So select the face that we want to unwrap of the tube, use the tool or come up to surfaces, sketch on surface. We get a new icon in our tree view. If I open this up, you can see we've got map sketch. If I double click the map sketch, we will be flipped around and you'll see that this face has been unwrapped. So anything we draw in here will get mapped to this face. So this will only work if we take a simple object like a tube and unwrap it. Anything like B-splines or tapered lofts, etc., then we get a different layout of the sketch, and we have to actually create the sketch and figure out the circumference of the object and recreate this sketch in here. It will appear as a small sketch basically at this point, but this is unwrapped fine. So this is the circumference of this circle. Our aim is to take the array and array this across behind the sketch to cover this, and also allow for the best fit for when it comes around and joins, so a seamless fit. The way I'm going to do that is come over to the model and click on the array. Now we can modify this array while this is sitting here. For instance, I can change the X to 4, and when we click off, nothing happens, but if we go to edit, refresh, then that will actually refresh. Take note of the refresh key. Mine's Control R because I'm on Ubuntu. On Windows it'll be something different, on Mac it'll be something else. So that's set the array back to number X as 1 and hit Control R. The diameters of these hexagons is 20 millimeters. So I'm going to divide 251.327, this value here, and divide that by 20, and we get 12.46635. So if we're coming back to our array, what we can do is come down to the X and we'll put 12 instances across here. Come over, hit Control R, and see how that lines up. Now we may want to drop this to say 11 instances and space this accordingly. So come into the array and set this to 11, and that gives us some more spacing to use across here. But I'm looking at this and thinking 12 is fine because we've got the remainder. So we set the X to 12, and now we need to tweak the placement of these. So come back over to the array, interval X, and we can use the X, pressing the up arrow, Control R, and what I'm looking to do is place this line through the middle, because if we look on the other side, right in the center there, we can see our hexagon sits in the center. If it doesn't, then we can come over to the array and move that using the placement. So come up to the placement position, and we can move this along the X to get in the right position. Let's come back over to the right hand side and zoom in. Come down to the interval X, pressing the up key, Control R, just to get us into position. So I can see this is going to be 22 point, let's go for 22.8, Control R, and we can just tweak this until we get into position. We can work this out with maths if we want to, but 22.85 puts me into the right position there. Remember to do the vertical as well, so we come into the Y, and we'll set this to say 3. It doesn't matter if we go outside this boundary, hit Control R. That's a bit too much. We want to be as close to this boundary as possible because we'll be less recompute time. So let's set this to 2, Control R. There we go. So we got that there, and we can make some adjustments of the array position to place it in the correct position along the Y-axis. So if I take the array, look along the position again, in the placement position along the Y, we can just tweak those values until we get the hexagons in the place that we want. I'm going to go for something like that. This rectangle, which is this face unwrapped, whatever's inside here is going to be wrapped around this circle or around this tube. But we haven't placed it on this sketch. We're going to be using something called an extra object. Let's come over to tasks and hit close. You can't see that boundary. We're actually upside down at the moment, so let's flip ourselves up to the top and see where we are. So we can't see that boundary at the moment. Let's come in and sketch on surface and scroll down. We can see the extra objects on the sketch on surface. Click on the extra objects, click the button on the end, and now it's going to ask us for the link. Word of warning, don't click it from the actual screen, so click our array from the screen. So what happens when you do that, the sketch is highlighted. We don't want that. If I hit clear, that removes that from there. So we need to click the array from here or select the array from the tree view. Select the array, we can see the array is highlighted in green and hit OK. We get a tick, meaning it's ready for recompute. And what will happen, we'll wait a while and that's been wrapped around that tube. Let's click on the array and press the space bar because we don't need that anymore. And we actually don't need this tube anymore. If you wanted to, we can hide this tube and click on the sketch, and we need to use the fill faces as true. Click off, let that recompute. And this is the reason why we don't add too many faces here. I'm running on a slow machine, a very slow machine, and a very old machine. So this will take a lot longer than what I expect it will do for you. The thickness, if we set this to say 3, which is 3 millimeters, it will go outwards. If we set this to -3, it will go inwards. Now if we bring back the tube, we can see how that sits there. And I'm going to boolean this away from this tube. Now we can see that the hexagons are extruding out at the bottom. So we can use an offset as well. Sketch on surface, offset. Using the minus value, we'll push it inwards. Using the plus value, we'll push the offset outwards. So I'm going to go 1 on the offset. Click off. We can see the hexagons are on the outside now. Now, if I did a Boolean cut against this, it will just take it away from this ring going around the outside. If this went all the way through, just by setting the offset to say -10 and hit enter, then that encapsulates that tube or ring there, and we can come over to the part workbench, click on the one that we want to keep, which is the tube. The one we want to remove next is the sketch on surface, and then use the cut. We now have our hexagon mesh on our surface, but we do have some problems. We have this here. So you can see in the cut, these haven't been removed. If this happens, we can explode this. Because it's a compound object, I can come up to part, compound, explode compound. And what will happen, this will explode out the cut, and you'll notice we've got some different items within here. So we've got the different pieces, so the pieces that haven't been removed are available, and we can just click on one, delete, and just delete the ones that we don't want away from here, just leaving that final cut. So that's how to get a hexagon mesh on a tube and also on a planar surface. I hope you enjoyed that video, and I hope to see you again soon.
If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to the site. I also have a Ko-Fi or a coffee site that you can donate to if you so desire, and that's at ko-fi.com/MANG0. I also run a Patreon where you can subscribe and get extra content, and that's at www.patreon.com/MangoJellySolutions. Any money that's kindly donated will be used to expand the channel. Thanks a lot for watching and subscribing, and I'll see you again soon.